morning, everyone. You're all ready to work? Okay. House lights off. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Digital Fireplace. I'm your host, Rebecca, and today we will be talking about the presentation of self as part of a 4-part series to answer the question, how can the practice of vlogging contribute to an understanding of the presentation of self in contemporary oral history making? Last time we discussed the actual practice of vlogging itself, trying to thickly describe the practice and its functions a little more thickly than we could have gotten from the dictionary itself. We know that vlogging is about the freedom of finding identity, the pleasure of watching people on the screen who are just like you. And to be honest, I'm more interested personally in the actual act of the presentation of self online. The highs and the lows of it, the truths and the falsehoods behind it. What does it mean to put your daily and weekly life experience on the screen in this way? Is the practice good for people? Does it actually give a true representation of who these people are? Erving Goffman was an extremely influential sociologist. Some would even say the most influential of the 20th century. You might have actually seen his name recently pop up in the show Mindhunter on Netflix. He wrote a book and it's called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And it was actually a very influential and interesting turning point for me in my research. Goffman puts forward the idea that everyone is always, or to some degree, performing themselves, or a version of themselves depending on the context environment that they're in. He asks us to think of life sort of as a stage where there's a relationship of 3 parts. Yourself as actor, the other actors that you play against, and the audience. But he actually claims that there's only 2 parts in real life. Yourself as the actor, the other actors who also happen to be the audience. And in this way of thinking sort of breaks the way we think of the stage in reality. The stage being a collection of stories and make-believe strung together, but reality as our truth, something that isn't acted but just is. We don't act who we are, we just are who we are, right? In his work, Goffman refers and quotes to a man called Robert Ezra Park, who happened to write a book in the 1950s called Race and Culture. And in the book he says this: "It is no mere historical accident that the word person in its first meaning is a mask. It is rather a recognition of the fact that everyone is always and everywhere, more or less consciously, playing a role. It is in these roles that we know each other, and it is in these roles that we know ourselves." And in a sense, and insofar as this mask represents the conception we have formed of ourselves, the role we are striving to live up to, this mask is our truer self, the self we would like to be. In the end, our conception of our role becomes second nature and an integral part of our personality. We come into the world as individuals, achieve character, and become persons. What Goffman and Ezra Park are trying to point out to everyone is that from the moment that you're born, you're trying to learn and feel out the roles that you will inhabit in life. We joke often about how children are always asking us, but why? When in reality, it's a great way for them to learn about their own growth, from child to main character in their own life narrative. They ask questions to help them understand the boundary of the roles their parents play with them, that of parent at work or at home or at play with them. I remember when I was a young girl and I would go and visit my dad at his pizza shop and go back behind the scenes and see him kneading the dough and talking to customers. He was my father in those moments, but he was also someone else. He was the boss, the businessman, the pizza guy. And I had the same feelings when I used to see my mother get ready for work in the morning. When she was in real estate, she would, put on her outfits and put on this makeup and become this serene entity, whereas I knew her as kind of wearing things that felt comfortable and walking around the farm with me and going to check on horses. They were both still the same people when I was watching them at work, but in those moments they were fulfilling a different kind of a role, and I started to see the difference. It's seeing that front and back stage and seeing how context works on a person. Now, I'm not the only person interested in utilising Goffman's work and applying it to the online realm. There was a guy called Liam Bullingham who wrote an article, and his research was focused on users and bloggers that were utilising the application Second Life. What he drew forth from his research was an understanding of the online world person and the physical separation to the offline world person, creating a split in their natural character, a front and a backstage. Online, the people within the study created identities full of the things that they really liked about themselves, that they could consider as prized or valuable to an audience member. And then their offline was still all of those things, but then there was also the added aspect of the things that they couldn't edit out. And that's what fascinates me about Bullingham's work. He's kind of saying what we're all thinking when we're watching these YouTubers or vloggers' lives unfold before us in a video. Is this really the true person we're seeing on the screen? Because they're definitely editing them. How can we accept this as the sum total of who they are? Humanity has gone through many numerous developments over the centuries, and our storytelling practices are no different. We've learned how to communicate with each other in a variety of ways, but it seems like now we're going backwards in time, relying more on our action to tell the story rather than written text. There's a great collection of articles that kind of focus in on this called On the Horizon, with the particular series I'm interested in called Storytelling in a Liminal Time. As a species, we try package our experiences in a way that we can teach others by giving them lessons in it. And storytelling has a flexibility and a quality, a social quality, that allows us to reach out to many numerous kinds of people we may know or may not. In storytelling in a liminal times terms, books serve to contain or package experience, so it may be stored and examined at leisure. Computers, by contrast, participate in the continuous flow of events. The material on the internet, which is so easily altered, merges far more easily into daily experiences. The writers of storytelling in a liminal time were interested in showing the importance that the classical storytelling practices had, and how digital media has impacted the practice itself. Once upon a time, individuals would travel village to village, speaking of what was happening in the far corners of the continent, telling stories of fantasy with morals and values to inspire a people to be connected to each other. These tales commented on societal thinking and culture, whilst also entertaining and connecting the individuals in it. Storytelling was, at the time, a practice that relied on the cadence of voice, the gesture of hands, and a physical audience. It played to all the senses, the story reacting to the physical or vocal cues given to it from its audience. The advent of the technologizing of word changed that, technologizing referring to the creation of written language. We no longer needed to rely on the memory of a speaker, on their voice or the embodiment of those characters. We had the book to do it for us. Storytelling, and in this sense, reading of stories, became a reflective process, the thoughts of the writer being set at the moment of mass publication, not knowing what the reception of the piece would be. And this was the same for television and cinema, which we already touched on in our last video. So many of the processes of storytelling now hinged on the time it took to reach the desired audience. An audience spread across the world, but the internet changed it all for us. We began to realize that we could react, critique, and be more present and involved with the stories told to us. This collection of essays, Storytelling in a Liminal Time, really shows the journey of storytelling, also helping a reader understand how the internet connected storytelling audiences in a new way. The practice of vlogging, however, took a few more years to kind of grow into the genre it is today. Vlogs in the early 2000 beginnings of the practice were essentially a sit-down conversation, and they were much like a book. They were reflective rather than reactive, meaning that it was a person sitting down and talking about their day to you, not taking you along for the day in an active way. And these beginnings, they were interesting, and the vlogs were beautiful, but they were often very stationary, confined to the intimate space of the bedroom. And we got close to these people. You get a sense of the intimacy of it. But really, what changed vlogs was the moment that people started picking up the cameras and vlogging things for themselves. It made the context change. Everything had more fluidity. The narrative, the angle, the styles made it what it is today. Instead of people going about and telling you about the party, they were actually taking you actively along to the party with them. My interviewees all discussed with me how amazing and wonderful it was to be able to interact with their audience in such a variety of ways, whether that was through you guys taking portions of their clips to be able to edit and comment on them, or by contacting them through multiple different platforms, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. There's something great about this interaction that you can have with your audience. But on the other hand, every single one of my interviewees also agreed that you didn't know the whole of them. You kind of only knew the world that they were showing you.
No, and I would say that for my main channel too. If we are gonna say out of 100%, I would say like 40 or 50.
They only see what I put in the vlogs. And a lot of people do, they make judgment calls and comment, and I tell them, I say, you know, do not judge what you do not know about. You only see a very small fraction of our lives, and you know that you're not really in a position to judge because you don't have enough information, because you've only got the information that you see here.
What these and other creators are trying to say is that you're really only seeing their front stage life. You're only seeing a part of them, one of the roles that they inhibit, that of a vlogger. So, if we take these considerations in mind, thinking as Goffman would, that we're all actors and we're all learning about the different roles that we'll play in different contexts in life, then we can apply that thinking to what some of my interviewees as active participants in the world of vlogger thought about the presentation of self. It was clear to me that they were all fascinated in the practice itself, and all in one way or another liked the idea of showing and presenting the things that interested them online. But at first, like myself, they found the actual act a little bit awkward or strange, really saying to themselves for the first time, "Watch me." But then that energy shifted and they began to get used to the act itself, and even now enjoying looking back on those moments and reflecting on who they were.
I watched ShanXO and I liked her vlogs, and I wanted to do the same thing because I thought just recording your life, it's fun to watch back. It makes you appreciate some things more, in my opinion, so that's what I like to do. That's how I knew I wanted to do it.
If we examine the way we now present ourselves and know that we're always acting on the stage of life and that every action we take in daily life has the potential for narrative, we can kind of understand how the vlogger came to be in its space in the world it is now. In some ways, we can understand that we're actively participating with a narrative rather than reflecting on it to write down later. Videos that we create now are a closer reflection of who we are and what we wish to represent about ourselves because we're doing it in the moment. But as I mentioned earlier, these videos are still, as Bullingham and Goffman would say, front of stage practice. And those performances do rely on some context. Coming back to that question of whether this is a true presentation of self, however, it was still kind of hard for me to answer that question until I came across Bruce Lambert's YouTube channel where he talks about Erving Goffman as well, how communication works. To Lambert, the self isn't some fruit with the center being the true version of yourself, that, you know, the core of the peach or the plum. It's more like what Schredt describes as onions have layers. The self is divided up into all the parts that you consider attributes of who you are. For me, I'm a researcher, I'm a sister, an aunt, a filmmaker, a creative, and so on. And each of these elements of me creates a layer to that onion. And they're all true versions of me because they're all the role I happen to play, but given a different context. So if we can understand and agree that no matter how much an audience member thinks that they know a creative online person or how much extra they demand of that person to show of themselves online, the creator themselves is always going to predominantly present the role that they've already created, because the context of YouTube vlogging and the screen itself, along with the editing and manner of viewing it, builds upon the front stage narrative. And that self and vlogger we see on the screen, it's still a layer of the onion that we can learn to love and cherish and understand. But understand in what way? What value can we find in tracking what someone's everyday experience is like? What could that information do for the history of people? How about you tune in next time where we talk in topic 3 about speaking the history of us. You can cut now. Okay, cut. We're good. Bye. Thanks so much for watching this video if you just did. I really appreciate it. Day 2, you know, we're tired, but we're cracking on here. If you would like, please join me next time for the 3rd episode in our installment, which is the history of us about contemporary oral history making. Yeah, please like, comment, subscribe. You know, say nice things about me in those comments because my examiners are watching this. Appreciate it.